If you lost your fortune today, what would you do tomorrow?
Maybe I'd run for president.
30 years before he ran for president, Donald Trump was talking about the same issues.
The United States is systematically being ripped off by many of the wealthiest countries of the world.
The fact is that the world is ripping off this country. Germany is ripping us off big league. Saudi Arabia is ripping us off big league.
Everybody's taking advantage of the United States. We're defending Japan and the Japanese folks, who I respect greatly, but they're not treating us fairly.
Trump didn't just talk about politics on TV. He spent nearly $100,000 on a full-page ad where he criticized U.S. foreign policy.
I find those ads ridiculous. He spent $100,000 for self-advertisements. Who's really interested in his foreign policy? Anybody? Maybe Mrs. Trump.
Trump's politics were shaped by his fear of weakness and by the zero-sum environment of Manhattan real estate.
We're going to have a war through weakness because this country is acting so weak toward Iran. It's pathetic.
In real estate, at least the kind of real estate that excited Trump, there was no such thing as a permanent ally or a win-win situation. Everything was temporary and transactional. Foreign affairs worked differently. After the success of The Art of the Deal and the positive reaction from some quarters to his political statements, Trump realized the public wanted to hear what he had to say, even about issues outside his wheelhouse.
You have said that if you ran for president, you'd win.
I think I'd have a very good chance. I mean, I like to win. When I do something, I like to win. I like to do well, and I think I probably would have a pretty good chance.
Trump enjoyed moonlighting as a political commentator, but events would soon drag him back to his core business. A pair of Forbes journalists were sent a leaked copy of a financial disclosure statement that Trump had to file with New Jersey's Casino Control Commission. The report revealed something which no amount of bluffing could hide. Donald Trump was drowning in debt. He fought hard to keep the story from being published, but it went to print with just one last-minute edit. His net worth was bumped up from $0 to $500 million. By now, being seen as rich and successful was an important part of Trump's business strategy. So the accusation that he wasn't actually as rich as he claimed to be was a big blow, especially when it was made by a media that was itching to bring him down a peg.
There's no reason to expose yourself to millions of people.
But you know why you do it?
Why?
You love the publicity.
Oh, I hate the publicity.
Oh, come on, get out of here.
I'm telling you, I hate the publicity.
Oh, please.
The revelation that Trump and his businesses were struggling financially marked the end of peak Trump and the beginning of the hardest period of his entire career. If the 1980s were the boom, then the 1990s were the crash. So what happened? It was a combination of both the micro and the macro. The micro was, well, that he was Donald Trump. He didn't pursue what you'd call a disciplined personal investment strategy. Instead, he leveraged against what was becoming his biggest asset, his personal brand. But brands can lose their appeal. The macro was slightly more complicated. When Trump began his career, New York City was experiencing a major economic and social crisis. He took advantage of historically low property prices and, frankly, a government that was desperate for extra revenue. When the economy rebounded, his fortune grew rapidly. His entry into the casino business followed a similar pattern. He got in soon after New Jersey legitimized casino gambling. Most of Trump's acquisitions were funded by debt. And that wasn't necessarily a problem, so long as the economy stayed strong. But that's not what happened. Right at the beginning of the 1990s, the US economy slipped into recession. Trump's businesses were all dependent on high levels of consumer spending. When the economy slowed down, they stopped spending money, and Trump started hemorrhaging cash. At one point, Trump was more than $3 billion in debt. In exchange for an emergency loan that kept the Trump organization afloat, Trump had to sell his yacht, airline, and part of the Grand Hyatt, one of his first ever real estate projects. His 3 casinos declared bankruptcy. He was even put on an allowance. Trump's high-profile problems weren't limited to his career either. His marriage was collapsing. Trump had started an affair with an aspiring actress, Marla Maples. The affair was splashed across tabloid headlines, in full view of the public, Ivana, and the couple's 3 children, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka.
Best sex I've ever had. This is the best one.
Ivana better deal.
When they divorced in 1991, Ivana got $14 million, the 45-room Connecticut mansion, and an apartment in Trump Plaza. Trump's critics greeted his downfall with schadenfreude. To them, his problems proved that the image he portrayed of being a self-made man who won by taking bigger risks than anyone else was fake. Instead, he only got to where he was because he received the sort of help other people didn't have access to: generous tax breaks from the government and millions of dollars worth of gifts and low-interest loans from his father. Trump took big risks because he knew he had a safety net, and it was those risky, high-profile investments that had created the Trump legend. Just when it looked like Trump had hit rock bottom, he was forced to finally admit defeat on the project he'd been chasing for years, the West Side Rail Yards. The community activists he'd fought for so long drew strength from Trump's struggles. They developed their own plans for the 76-acre lot. Once he'd accepted the proposal brought by the local activists, all the political opposition he'd been facing suddenly melted away. He eventually sold the development rights to a consortium of businessmen from Hong Kong. It saved him from the ultimate indignity, filing for personal bankruptcy. And it marked the beginning of one of the most famous and controversial comebacks in history. The turmoil that destroyed Donald Trump's marriage and almost destroyed his career was a major inflection point in his life. From now on, he wasn't going to be the biggest developer in New York City. He had to become something else. But if Trump was going to reinvent himself, first he needed a comeback. Comebacks are a key part of Trump's psychology. They're his way of telling himself and the whole world that even though it looked like he might be losing, he actually just wasn't winning yet. And comebacks are the transition from the about-to-be-winning state to the winning state. The other thing to know about a Trump comeback is that the facts come second to the story. That's not to say the comeback wasn't real. It was. Trump made a good deal when he sold the development rights to the West Side Rail Yard site. Taking the Trump Plaza Casino public on the New York Stock Exchange helped him solve his immediate cash flow problems. And convincing the banks that they didn't want to get involved in the casino business took a lot of courage and instinct. All up, Trump went from a net worth of negative $900 million to positive $700 million in 5 years. But he was never content to let the numbers speak for themselves. In word and deed, he told America that he was back. He started splashing out on high-profile assets like the Miss Universe, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA pageants, as well as a 70-story office building at 40 Wall Street, which he renamed the Trump Building. He released The Art of the Comeback, a book-length announcement that he was back, and that he remembered the names of everyone who deserted him in tough times. Telling everyone that he was back generated business opportunities, positive media stories, and a sense of momentum that was impossible to resist.
Mr. Trump here wrote The Art of the Deal. Then he wrote a new bestseller, The Art of the Comeback. 2 books. Wow.
It was genius, and it taught Trump a lesson. People love a comeback story. He filed it away for future reference.
Over the years, I've surprised a lot of people. The biggest surprise is yet to come.
Now that he had a comeback story to sell, Trump became curious about another potential run for the presidency. A political consultant he'd started working with by the name of Roger Stone commissioned some polling. More than 3/4 of respondents said they'd never vote for him. But despite that, there was good raw material to work with. He was one of the most famous people in America. Just 17% of respondents, basically 1 in 6, had no opinion about Trump. And people loved his story. They saw a successful businessman who embodied the American dream. They saw him as someone who got things done.
I sort of love and hate him at the same time. I mean, I think he has, a monumental ego.
He comes off as being very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Arrogant?
Yeah, he's arrogant.
I like him.
You do?
Man's got it made, got everything.
Perhaps the most interesting result was that more people, about 1/4 of all respondents, saw Trump as liberal, more than the share of people that saw him as a conservative. Trump's political identity had long been a mystery, perhaps even to himself. He was a rich guy at a time when being rich almost automatically meant being Republican, but his social life, the parties, the girlfriends, the tabloid stories made him seem more like a Democrat. Remember, this was a time when the Democratic president happened to be a well-known womanizer.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The results bolstered Trump's belief that if he put his mind to it, he could be president.
They say a job like president requires a big ego. Now, do you think you can handle it?
I'm not sure my ego is big enough. That's one of the things which I can...
Really? Can I write that down?
You can write it.
But before he could make any decisions about what to do next, tragedy struck. In June of 1999, his father, Fred Trump, died. He'd been suffering from dementia for years, and when he contracted pneumonia, he couldn't fight it off. Privately, Donald was heartbroken, but publicly, he used the occasion to reminisce about his favorite subject, himself. He began his eulogy to his father by saying that it was the toughest day of his own life. It was ironic, he said, to have learned of his death right after reading a New York Times story, front page, about one of his own successful developments. Marla Maples didn't attend Fred Trump's funeral. Her and Donald had divorced 17 days before his death. Instead, Trump was accompanied by Melania Naus, a Slovenian model who he'd been dating since the previous year.
How did you two meet?
We met in New York, 1998.
You like him right away?
It was a great chemistry and energy.
After the funeral and a drawn-out fight over his father's will, Trump turned his focus back to the question he'd been mulling over since before his father's death. Should he run for president? This time, he'd come closer than ever before. But it wouldn't be as a Republican or a Democrat. Instead, he almost ran for the party that, out of nowhere, had emerged as a real force in American politics. Before Donald Trump, there was another successful businessman who'd made a massive impact on US politics. His name was Ross Perot. The founder of a successful data company, Perot ran for president in 1992 and 1996.
Do you want a government that comes at you from Washington, or do you want a government that comes from you? Okay. Who do the people in Washington work for? Who pays their salaries? I want to be your president.
Although he didn't win a single electoral vote either time, he introduced Americans to a new kind of politics. His views didn't fit neatly into either the Republican or Democrat columns. He was skeptical about free trade at a time when both major parties supported it. And he supported a balanced federal budget while also wanting to raise taxes on the wealthy. Lots of people, especially those who didn't support him, called Perot a populist. Whatever he was, he struck a chord with voters. Perot won almost 18% of the popular vote running as an independent in the 1992 election, the highest share won by a third-party candidate for 80 years. 4 years later, he won 8% of the vote as the Reform Party candidate. From his penthouse, Donald Trump was watching closely. A successful CEO with experience running a big company had just shaken up American politics. Perot demonstrated that there were votes in challenging the consensus on mainstream issues like free trade. And besides, Trump had way more name recognition. If he ran, why couldn't he win? Acting on the advice of his friend Jesse Ventura, a former professional wrestler who'd been elected governor of Minnesota, Trump joined the Reform Party. He formed an exploratory committee, went on talk shows, took a high-profile campaign swing to California, and vowed to spend $100 million to win not just the Reform Party nomination, but the presidency. He rushed out a book outlining his policy proposals. He even talked about having Oprah as his running mate. Trump won the Reform Party's California primary. It looked like he'd win the entire nomination. He could have been up on stage with George W. Bush and Al Gore, two guys who weren't exactly known for their charisma. And then, just as quickly as he entered the race, Trump dropped out.
I'm not going to be running. The party is, as you know, self-destructing.
The Reform Party was being consumed by infighting. Trump believed it wasn't in a position to give him the support he needed. But that was a smokescreen. Even after the Reform Party collapsed, he could have just run as a self-funded independent. Trump didn't run in 2000 because he knew that if he ran and didn't win, he'd look like a loser. That was his biggest nightmare.
I would run if I thought I could win, and in order to
Not only the nomination, but the presidency.
The whole thing. I don't want to get 20% of the vote, and I think I could, and I know I could get the nominations. But I always said, and I said to you, if I could win the whole thing, you can only win the whole thing with a totally unified party.
But Trump didn't close the door on a future run. When asked by a reporter if he'd consider running again, for real, he said he'd consider it in a few years.
It's a real possibility.
We're back to the flirtation here.
Well, I always flirt.